we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.
Nigel Farage is leader of the UK Independence Party and an MEP, of course. A referendum now, I'm assuming.
Well,
Why?
Well, actually, it's long overdue, isn't it? I mean, we haven't had a vote on this since 1975. And as one of your callers said, you know, my mum and dad voted for us to stay in a common market. Everybody told them it was just about trade, no political risk, and don't worry your little heads, please. So they feel they were lied to. They feel they were conned, and they want the chance to vote again. I'm under 54. In fact, there are 30 million of us that are voters that are under 54 that have never had a chance to express a view on this issue. So it's overdue. Is now a good time? Well, Mr. Cameron, of course, says that now is not the right time, but this, of course, the man that gave us a cast-iron guarantee that he would give us a referendum. So there's a lot of political manoeuvring
But
here.
that was on Lisbon, which by then had already been signed and sealed.
Well, the 1975 referendum that we had in Britain was retrospective. Remember that. So that argument, I'm afraid, does not hold water. The 17 Eurozone countries are doing everything they can to keep Greece and Portugal in the euro. They're using vast amounts of our money to do it, but politically they are moving towards a fiscal and political union. And as members of the European Union, we will be dragged in the wake of that. Now is the time for the British Prime Minister to say, your house is on fire, and what you are doing by trapping Greece inside this economic prison is actually making things worse. So I think now is a very good time. And as far as the UK economy is concerned, we have 20% youth unemployment at a time when we have open-door immigration to the whole of Eastern Europe. We have new directives coming in every month. Just this month, the Agency Workers Directive became law. That's going to cost a further 25,000 jobs. There is every reason economically for saying we'd be far better off out of this thing.
Philip Souter is the Director of Business for New Europe, a coalition of pro-European British business leaders. Philip, good afternoon. You're in Brussels. A referendum now or not?
Well, I think you're right to divide the question into whether it's right to have a referendum now and then further whether our membership of the EU is a good thing. I think a referendum is not a good idea. Two principal reasons. Firstly, it would be a distraction. Nigel himself said that the economy is in a dire strait, and that's exactly what we should be concentrating on. But secondly, there's this far more, I think, powerful argument, which is about democracy. Britain is a democracy. Yesterday, Parliament spoke. That was democracy in action. 283 MPs voted against the motion, 111 voted for it. That is a defeat for those people supporting the motion.
If it had been a free vote, you might have had a sounder argument along those lines, wouldn't you?
Well, nobody forced those MPs to follow their whips. There are all sorts of personal calculations that go on, but this was not a forced vote by any means. And we are a representative democracy. Opinion polls show that Europe's nowhere near the top of voters' concerns, and we have elections fought by political parties on clear and comprehensive political platforms. I mean, people have the opportunity to vote for UKIP, which says we'll take, you know, the UK out of the EU, and UKIP won 3.1% of the vote last year.
They did quite well in the European elections, though, which is why Nigel Farage is an MEP.
I know, but that's because he couldn't get elected in the House of Commons, because UKIP is a protest vote.
Just one more to you, if I may, before I take a couple more calls, because I just want to test your referendum position more broadly. If we get to the point where there is a significant shift in Britain's position within the EU, there's a renegotiation of aspects of our membership, does that then require a referendum in your mind? Because that's what I think every now main political party is saying should happen.
Well, I think that a referendum would be one. In the same way that it was one in 1975, the initial opinion polls suggested that people wanted to leave the European Economic Community as it then was, but after they heard the arguments and the facts were presented to the British people, again, the British people aren't stupid, and they decided, and it wasn't just about the economics. Ted Heath spoke about this being a political project as well, and they voted overwhelmingly for this, for our membership, and I think that's exactly what would happen again.
Well,
but we have general elections, so it's just, you can vote, and nobody's forcing us to be members of the EU. We could leave at any time we wanted.
Right, well, we'll explore that in the second half of the programme. Anne Walden's in High Wycombe. Anne, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And
by bringing up this issue again.
You make a fair point. Do you want to respond to that, Nigel Farage, specifically, because we're still on the why now argument, and if the economic situation is as bad as Anne says, and clearly plenty will agree with her, this is a distraction, potentially a very risky one.
The British Chancellor of the Exchequer has absolutely zero control over employment regulation, over health and safety regulation, and over environmental regulation. All of that is now decided somewhere else. And even Britain's biggest industry, financial services, is now regulated by 3 new European regulatory authorities. And the argument is we're in a mess because of excessive regulation that we can't do anything about, and we have this problem. Never before in our history have we had a total open door labour market, which we now have to the whole of Eastern Europe. 8 out of 10 jobs created last year went to foreign-born migrants at a time when youth unemployment is 20%. And the argument is that by having this referendum now, by changing our relationship with the EU to one of free trade and cooperation, not membership of political union, we will actually give George Osborne the power to help British business and to cut unemployment.
Anne Walden, a quick reaction to that, if you would.
Nonsense.
That's a quick
the
reaction.
The regulations introduced by the EU are to protect British workers from exploitive employers, and I think they should remain in place.
Okay, I want to explore that more because I know Nigel Farage has further views on that. I'd certainly be interested to hear Philip Souter's view on that from the business point of view, because clearly there are arguments about the cost of those directives and whether or not they are a good or a bad thing. At 12:32, let's hear from Sean Lay about the world, at one where I think you might be continuing the theme, Sean.
We too are looking at the aftermath.
Nigel Farage, a response to that, and then I'll go to Philip Souter on regulation.
Yeah, I mean, these arguments, in fact, financial services, what we've had since 1999 from Brussels, is a blizzard of regulation, masses of it. What we also did was make some vast mistakes with our banks. I think the point is...
Didn't regulate them sufficiently.
Well, what we did, in fact, was to abolish legislation that had been in place for many, many years, and we took away the power of controlling our banks from the Bank of England and gave it to bureaucrats down the road at the FSA. But really the point is this. You're quite right. We, of course, ourselves can over-regulate our businesses. But once every 4 or 5 years in a general election, we can vote for a government that says we're going to abolish this legislation, we're going to sack these civil servants. There is no mechanism by which the British electorate can get rid of Mr Barroso, Mr Van Rompuy, or the 30,000 people in Brussels that now govern this country. We cannot do it via the ballot box.
Philip Souter, let's talk regulation. How much do you say British business is being affected by regulatory measures coming out of Brussels?
I think that British business is affected by regulatory measures that come out of Brussels, that come out of Whitehall, that are agreed at a global level by the World Trade Organization and all sorts of bodies which control the way that jobs and growth are sort of created. The thing is, this is not some giant conspiracy. We did a poll quite recently of business leaders, with Ipsos Mori. 74% of them said that they believed the UK's withdrawal from the EU would be damaging, compared to 22% who didn't. Not a single serious political party thinks we should withdraw. This is not a conspiracy. It's about jobs and growth. And why? Because the benefits are large, and the alternative, which we should talk about, which is EFTA, so the Norway-Switzerland model, is absolutely risible.
Why?
Now,
why is that risible?
I'll explain that in a moment, but Europe needs to reform. We are not some apologist for the European Union. We, for instance, as an organisation, believe that the EU should cut its budget by about 10% and focus more on infrastructure, research, innovation and development. And there are regulations which need to be changed. But in terms of the alternative, I think what Nigel would propose would be, perhaps he proposes totally splendid isolation where we withdraw from the WTO, the IMF and all international organizations. But I think he'd propose EEA-EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, which is it has Iceland, Norway, Switzerland. Now, you have to pay the European Union quite a lot of money to be a member of that. You have to follow all of the rules, but you have no say whatsoever in what they are. You have access to the single market, but you can't affect or in any way influence those rules. And that would the British people would never agree to that.
Well, let me just boil that down, because I've got some figures in front of me here. In 2013, members of those two organisations that you refer to, contributions to EU programmes estimated to be €284 million. EEA and EFTA member states also contribute to development in new member states through various grants. Over a period of 5 years, €357.7 million per year. So if you do go down that road, Nigel Farage, you're still paying into the EU anyway.
Yeah, but we're paying £45 million a day at the moment.
And we have a say, whereas this way you wouldn't.
Well, we have an 8% say in the laws that are made, so we can be outvoted on literally everything. The point we're missing here is, of course, we can have a free trade deal with the European Union. That's no problem at all, and they, of course, sell us far more goods than we sell them. What we're losing, being part of this, is we're losing a voice on the global stage. We are forbidden from attending World Trade talks at the WTO. Not allowed in the room, because that work is done for us by the European Union. And I want us to look globally. We should have a deal with the Commonwealth. We should have a deal with countries like Japan. Switzerland has a free trade deal with Japan. We don't, which illustrates that small countries who are flexible and adaptable can do far better.
Mark Bainbridge, quick comment on that from you, and then I'll go back to the phones.
Yes, it's interesting sort of opening up the debate there. I mean, one of the things we've looked at is this idea of the costs and benefits of the EU, and we've gone through quite a lot of those. It was with some of our callers as well, in terms of the fisherman and the farmer, Paul and John, earlier on. I mean, the overall net position that we sort of calculated was that actually withdrawing from the EU and setting up some other free trade kind of agreement would be a small positive economic benefit to the UK, which then again also indicates that the idea of withdrawing and a massive loss of wealth for the UK simply isn't there at the moment. And what we've sort of looked at is the kind of things that we were just debating there with Nigel and Philip, is a sort of to think about a spectrum of ideas. And I think that's something which often the debate sort of gets condensed into this sort of you stay in or you withdraw entirely. But in reality, there's a sort of spectrum of ideas for people to think about. And it's this kind of education and getting these ideas through to people more generally, which I think is the important issue.
Let me go back to the phones. Beryl Davies is in.
Fortunately, in terms of investment, that's probably the biggest effect that you'd see. But I think it's important to look at the idea of the single market, because that is an enormous achievement. And President Sarkozy might say that Britain should keep its nose out, but that is absolutely wrong. The UK is a member of the European Union, and we should say what we think ought to happen as far as the Eurozone is concerned, etc. And we can't make those arguments from the outside.
And I just want to put that to Nigel Farage, because there was a Department of Business Innovation and Skills study on this, and they argued, and I quote this, that EU countries trade twice as much with each other as they would do in the absence of the single market.
Well, because you're comparing the world in 2011 with the world back in 1970.
Well, what about this one from Steve Horner? In a world where Brazil, Russia, India and China will be the giants, we need to be in the United States of Europe to have enough say and strength to be a player.
We have no say. Can I please repeat this point? That Hong Kong has a seat at the World Trade Organization talks. We don't. We turned our backs on the Commonwealth to join the common market. Little did we know those years ago that the Commonwealth, which is now nearly a third of the population of the earth, would have within it fantastically successful countries like Australia, Canada, where there'd be no banking crises at all, and of course India, which may well be the number one economic power in 20 years' time. They are asking us, they are begging us to have a special arrangement with them, to do a deal with our Commonwealth, a Commonwealth free trade area on top of a free trade area with Europe. My vision is for a global future for Britain.
But if we
it's much more exciting.
If we get out of the EU, that will be a protracted and probably quite awkward negotiation, leaving some pretty resentful feelings in some places. It's hard to imagine it being any other way. Well, therefore, surely, those who've been on the receiving end of that decision are going to turn around, just as Nicolas Sarkozy did within the last few days, and tell us what they think, and that will cost in pounds, shillings and pence.
Do you know, I think that Britain, having a simple free trade deal with the European Union, we'd be followed in short order by Austria, Finland, Denmark, the Netherlands. We actually would give leadership, and we'd lead the way for a new kind of Europe.
Mark
based on
Bainbridge, do you see it that way?
Yes, I do. I mean, I agreed with Nigel to some extent on that. I mean, Nigel's obviously position is to withdraw entirely.
Sure.
Our view is that you can think about a sort of phased withdrawal and move away from being tied into certain key aspects of the EU, which clearly don't do us any benefit, as we've heard, in terms of the net budget situation, in terms of regulation, in terms of CAP, fisheries as well, and indeed the trade balance, and let alone moving into things which clearly were sort of fairly disastrous, like ERM. So the idea is to maybe to think about the rest of the world, as Nigel was saying, that these other countries, Commonwealth is sort of one example of a group of countries which we have obviously close ties to, are growing much faster than the rest of Europe. These countries are growing at sort of around about 8 to 10% a year, whereas Europe is sort of, at the best, is kind of growing at around about sort of 2 to 3%.
Philip, so just one more on this trade issue before I go back to the phones. I think it was John Redwood during the debate last night who said, you know, if we got to the point where we leave, why, for example, would France suddenly stop selling us wine, Germany stop selling us cars? It just wouldn't happen. Why would that happen?
Of course it wouldn't, but they would put up barriers that would be subtle, that would damage British business and that would advantage French businesses. And that is the way, unfortunately, that the world works. But it's relatively liberal organisations like the European Commission that polices mergers, that tries to prevent from protectionism happening, that stops that. I mean, there's a fascinating figure. Most people in the UK think that the UK pays 25% of its GDP to the EU. Now, it's about 1%. There is a huge amount of disinformation out there, and people don't know the facts. The thing is, 50% of our trade is with other EU member states, and that's done on a sort of regulatory basis whereby you have two poles in Europe. You have the liberal countries, Germany, Britain, the Netherlands, and you have the more protectionist countries, France and the others. If we were to leave, that whole regulatory settlement would skew towards the French and others like them, and the rule book that we'd have to follow anyway, like Norway and Switzerland, would become less open.
But just on that rule book, I mean, haven't those procurement laws that we currently do follow shown to not favour us in recent times with what happened at Bombardier? The contract for that particular train building programme was given to a German company, Siemens, and lots of jobs have gone, and we were told it's because we had to abide by procurement laws.
Fine. The thing is, that was a British company that was making that decision. Should a British company be forced to buy products that are less competitive in their views from the UK, or should they be able to make a commercial decision? This is the whole British jobs for British workers refrain. We're either a free market and open and competitive, or we close our borders and we shrink as we protect uncompetitive products.
I'm conscious of the time. Let's squeeze some calls in before we say farewell. Nada Fekri's in West Yorkshire. Nada, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Your point here. Very well, very well.
I may be a rarity amongst your callers and certainly your panel, but I'm actually a huge fan of the European project. And can we call a spade as it is? These aren't Eurosceptics, they're Europhobes. They're little Englanders of the worst kind. And they have this nostalgic, rose-tinted view of what Britain would be outside. Actually, we've gained so much. My students study in Europe. I've taught for years in France, in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Slovakia. We get greater understanding and far greater millions. 2.5 million Brits who live in Europe. What do they expect? This rebirth of the Commonwealth, I think if you scratch them, what they find is they want Britain to be at the head of this Commonwealth, and there's actually no reason why that would happen.
I'm not going to scratch Nigel Farage, but I will put the charge of Europhobe, Mr. Farage.
No,
Europhobes.
We are not Europhobes.
Oh,
I'm married to a German. I've worked for 2 French companies. They did both sack me, but I'm trying not to bear the grudge. and I drink probably...
that's what you want.
And I drink more Rioja than is good for me. I love Europe. I love travelling around Europe. What I hate is this attempt...
the rules instead of standing on the sidelines like those fat dads on a Saturday morning, berating the ref.
We've been there.
Rather than getting you involved. No. The problem is at every opportunity we've not taken it. We've been half-hearted about it, and then we complain when the other stronger economies make the rules and they say, that's not how we would.
We've been there 35 years. We haven't reformed it. Nobody in Europe is going to renegotiate a new deal for us. Let's be honest. Either we're part of this thing or we're free of it.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
Nada, I'm going to say thank you.
Why is nobody voting for you in the general elections then?
Well, we came second in the European elections, something that no fourth party has ever done in British politics before.
That is an important point, though, Nigel Farage, isn't it? When we had the chance to vote, when we had the chance to vote at a general election, people didn't vote.
Well, if I'd had the chance to do a debate on the European question with the other three party leaders, I suspect things may have been different. But there's been the media's fault. No. A conspiracy of silence. We've got three political leaders
Nigel,
who believe in us being in Europe, and they don't want us to have a debate, and we saw that contempt in Parliament last night.
In a minute and a half, Ruth Reed in Thatcham, welcome to the programme.
Very interesting discussion. Who's going to be my candidate for UKIP next time round? I'd just like to say that if we were the first to go out of Europe, then there are so many other countries that would follow us. We should spearhead this, and see what happens. We have got other countries to, work with and trade with. And somebody said that I was probably an old fuddy-duddy who kept on wanting the Commonwealth. Well, we let the Commonwealth down, and we are now paying the price of it, and far too much.
You've made your point very succinctly. I don't know who your UKIP candidate is at the next election, but at some point I don't doubt that they will inform you, particularly if they know that you're going to vote for them, which it sounds as if you might. On that note, thank you all very much for being a part of today. Nigel Farage, thank you. Mark Bainbridge, thank you. Philip Souter, likewise, thank you all. That debate will no doubt continue. In other places, let me tell you about tomorrow.
We don't want that flag. We don't want the anthem. We don't want this political class. We want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.